Hello everybody, Nadala Clowen, Merry Christmas. And today I'm going to show you how I go about cleaning all my spinning wheels. It's something I like to do at this time of year. As a bit of a Christmas, the work year's over, it's time that I'm going to get to do a bit of relaxing, hopefully spend some time with my spinning wheels. I've got an array of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of them lined up behind me. They're all ever so slightly different. They all need looking after in ever so slightly different ways. When I go and teach workshops, oddly, one of the things that I end up helping people with the most is getting their spinning wheel working properly, because it's amazing how many people don't really give their spinning wheels the attention and the care that they need. And they do need looking after. Even if you've got a spinning wheel that's got sealed bearings, actually it still needs an awful lot of cleaning. A wheel like this antique Norwegian one here is going to need more looking after, but even like this one here, which is completely sealed bearings, it's still going to benefit from every now and again be giving it a bit of TLC and looking after it and trying to make sure that everything about it's working properly. So I'm going to work through a few different wheels. Hopefully you can see one that's similar to one of the ones you've got in stock in your house. What we're going to need, you probably will need, is a damp cloth, because that's going to help get rid of any of the dirt, particularly off the treadles and things. A soft duster type cloth of some format, because that's going to help get rid of the layer of dust. My wheels end up dusty the most because the heating in my house is purely by a wood burning stove, and plus I run a fibre business from home, which means I have a lot of dust. But even so, most wheels could just benefit with a quick wipe round to get rid of the dust off the surface. Some kitchen roll is a good thing to have. It's really good for wiping off all the old dirty oil, which once you've done that, you will need some fresh oil. Even if you've got a wheel with sealed bearings, you should still have some spinning wheel oil, and I'll show you where to put that on. And if you've got a wheel that doesn't have a finish of some sort of varnish or lacquer on it, you'll probably also want to use some sort of furniture polish just to treat the wood to keep that in a really nice condition. So I'm going to start off with my Shacked matchless. This is one of the models from the 1980s, but they've not changed a great deal, so it's all going to be relatively comparable. The first thing I'm going to do is the treadle plate where our treadle gets particularly grimy and grubby, and it's kind of more than dust that's stuck on it. This sort of, that looks like a coffee ring. I've no idea how that's got on there, but anyway, it's the treadle plate is really quite grubby, and it's grubby in a way that just using a duster to wipe off the layer of dust isn't going to do the job. I am of the opinion that my spinning wheels are tools. I am perfectly okay with having a treadle that has got footmarks on it that you can see that it's been used. I'm not after a wheel to carry on looking pristine as if I've just bought it out of the box. Oil stains, everything else, they're a sign that the wheel has been used, loved, well looked after. But I do think it's important that you do also give them a bit of TLC. So just a damp cloth, it doesn't want to be soaking wet. And that's just going to move off the kind of surface layer of dirt that was particularly well stuck on there. So there's some people that are horrified by the state that my foot plates are in. I am aware of shoes whilst I spin. I don't bother taking them off. Right, while that's drying, I'm just going to go over all the other bits with a dry duster, because this is all just surface dirt. See what I mean about dusty? Really ought to clean more often, but there's always better things to do, which is why at this time of year it's one of those really sort of satisfying wheel spa days, because I can do them all in one go, and then it sort of sells a bit of a conscience balm. So going on the inside, getting rid of all the bits of dust that accumulate, particularly where the wheel's been sat at the bottom. So all the flat surfaces where the layer of grime might accumulate. So I'll go along there and along there and on the back of the treadle plate. Attach myself. So most modern spinning wheels, you will be able to find a manual for them somewhere, and that manual will really help you in getting to know your spinning wheel slightly better, because there's quite a lot of complicated bits and pieces. So I've just been over, I've got rid of all the layers of dust. I'm now going to take off anything I've got attached to my wheel. I'm going to take off the bobbin that's on there from the last time I've been spinning. That wheel's a bit tight, that can come off there, you can come off there. One of my favourite tips for replacement drive band material, because drive bands are one of those things, it's really easy to leave the same old horrible bit of string on them for time after time after time, is this stuff, and I've nearly always got a roll of it with me at workshops, and it's pony bead lacing, and it's got a nice amount of stretch, it's not too thick, and it makes a join using these little plastic connectors that go in the middle that's really strong until you just tease it open, and at which point it pops off. But I've never had one come off whilst I'm spinning, and it makes it very easy to adjust to get the right size, as opposed to the melty plastic ones. I can never get them to be the right size and to stay joined together. So that's my recommendation if you need replacement drive band, and it's thin enough that even if your wheel likes string drive bands, it will work for that purpose as well. Right, having taken off all of those bits, what I'm now going to do is I'm now going to get my roll of kitchen roll, and I'm now going to go over all the bits of the flyer mechanisms, and I'm going to wipe off all the dirty old oil. So can you see that layer of dirt? That's just where dust and things have got trapped in the oil, a very fine layer of the metal that will have worn off, and I'm going to wipe it all completely clean. So inside, we need to come a little bit closer, inside there, that's the bearing at the back. I'm just going to poke my bit of kitchen roll in, make sure I've got the oil out of there, wipe off the dirt and dust from around the outside. I'm going to do the same on the front flyer bit. Okay, and that's why kitchen roll is quite nice, because it's very it's sturdy but flexible, so you can see how dirty and grimy that gets. And your wheel will sound so much quieter and so much happier for having done this. So even if you've not got a matchless, you can do the same thing no matter what wheel you own. You go over it, you wipe off all the bits of old oil that might have been on, because even if you've got a wheel with sealed bearings, you do need to oil the flyer shaft, because most wheels don't have bobbins that have got bearings in the bobbin ends, so that bit still needs oiling. Right. I'm going to carry on wiping this off. Okay, next bit, which I know will be particularly dirty and grubby, is this part here, which is the sealed axis. Sometimes I will take wheels to pieces in order to do this. Again, you find the manual, and to be quite honest, not a lot is going to go wrong if you undo some nuts and bolts, providing you can remember where you fastened them back up to. It's always a good idea to periodically tighten up all the Allen keys, all the bolts, because you'd be amazed how much they shake loose. Again, it's another thing that I do a lot of during workshops, is tighten everything up. I'm not going to do that this time because I don't think it's going to be necessary, but again, with your bit of kitchen roll, you can kind of get in and clean off in there. It's a good idea to look and see in these places here, that's where all the loose bits of fibres can accumulate. So sometimes you might need to either get a fine-ended pair of scissors or very fine-ended tweezers or something sharp to get in there and prise out any loose bits of fluff. And again, you'd be amazed how many spinning wheels I've made work better just by removing the bit of fibre that was trapped around the axle that somebody hadn't noticed was there. So we're going to do the same on this back bit here. Get rid of all this dirty old oil. Get right into this back bearing here. Give that bit of clean off. And then the final thing that I like to do is we turn the whole thing upside down, do it carefully, remove the dust that's accumulated underneath it, and then have a look at where your wheels, if that moves, treadle bar is. So in this one, it's that point here. It'll be different on every single wheel, and again, give that a really good clean off because that bit's on the floor. It's amazing how grimy it can get down there, and it will make your spinning so much easier if you're not doing battle with a layer of accumulated grease and dirt. And if we just give the wheel a slight treadle so I can get at more of it. So I'm not going for perfect. It's not a complete strip down and recondition. It's a bit of much needed TLC rather than anything else. Right, that being done, let's look at how much dirt has just come off this one spinning wheel, and wiping it down is something that I do reasonably regularly. What we're then going to do is we're then going to give the wood a feed, and I'm also going to put some fresh oil on all the bits and pieces where it needs it. How you give the wood a feed and whether you need to give the wood a feed depends upon the wheel that you've got. So if it's a wheel that's got a very thick layer of lacquer or varnish on it that's been applied by the factory, the chances are you don't need to do anything else with it. If it's a wheel like this one where you can still sort of feel a bit of the grain of the wood, or a wheel like the very old antique one that I've got there, then some form of wax furniture polish is your best friend. We make our own using the beeswax from our hives, but just any old beeswax furniture polish, not the spray-on-y type stuff. Proper, apply it with a cloth, rub it in, rub it off, and that will just give the wood a bit of nourishment and a bit of feed, and it's going to help make sure that your quite expensive wheel carries on looking good for a long time in the future. So I'm going to get on and do that. So don't forget the fly bit as well. And now's also a good time to have a look and double check. What you might have on some flyers that have got flat bits is you can get these like little wear bits, and you can see where I've sanded this bit there, because what happens is as it cuts a groove you can end up with some rough edges that are snagging. So it's worth, if you've got one of those, get a bit of sandpaper, just gently smooth it down, and then just put some wax over the top of it just to seal it. Take a look and check all the hooks are in properly and everything's all right there. And it's also worth at this point taking a look, if you've got Scotch tension, at your Scotch tension band, whether that needs replacing. Is it getting frayed? Is it getting worn? I tend to use elastic bands rather than springs on my wheels. Elastic bands generally are free, because I can't remember the last time I bought any, and I've certainly got a huge number in a drawer, and they can be replaced really easily. They've got a nice amount of give in them. It's relatively easy to rig up. Quite a nice Scotch tension device with them. And worst case scenario is if I'm taking my wheel somewhere and the flyer gets caught as I'm getting out of the car or similar, what can end up happening is it's very easy to end up with the Scotch tension band slipping off, getting caught, and then the spring gets pulled out, and then you're left with no way of tensioning your wheel if you've not bought a spare bit of kit with you. If an elastic band snaps, generally I can manage to tie enough of a knot in it to keep it working for slightly longer. So I tend to use elastic bands because I have stretched out so many springs accidentally over the years that it's not true. Right, once everything's had its coat of polish, technically you then need to buff it off. Don't polish the rim of the wheel, because that's where the drive band's going to go, and what we don't want it to do is slip too much, because it relies on friction, and that means you don't want to grease or oil it. But what we now need to do is we now need to re-oil all the places where we took off the oil previously. So on this wheel, that's this part here and into the hole itself, into where the front maiden bearing is. Okay, that one likes quite a lot of oil because it's a brass one. Into either side of the axle here. Your spinning wheels manufacturer's manual will tell you where you need to oil it. And onto there, because where the footman rotates, just there, that's also where we need to oil. And my footman at the bottom as well, that needs some oil. And move the flyer out the way. We're also going to do, let's bring the camera down a bit, because we've now moved everything down. So we're also going to do the treadle bar down here. That's going to have some oil. You can also use Vaseline if you don't want to be trying to do it quite so often, but oil works well. So let's pull that out. I'm going to leave the polish to sit and soak in for a little bit of time before I polish it off. I'll go and do one of the other wheels before I come back to it. And finally, I'm just going to put some oil on the flyer shaft. And normally I put a fresh bobbin back on, but I haven't got one to hand, because that's the bare minimum of oiling points for any wheel, regardless of what bearings it's got. And let's just pop that back on there to keep it safe, so I don't accidentally drop anything of it. So that's the shacked matchless. That's how I go about looking after and do that. And the basic principle is the same no matter which wheel you've got. Wipe off any dust, wipe off any dirt, remove any dirty oil from all the bits that are rotating. Once you've done that, if it's a wheel that hasn't got a lacquered finish, put some wax finish polish on it, leave that to soak in, re-oil all the points where you wiped the oil off, and then once you've left the wax finish polish to soak in, you can give it a quick buffing with a fresh cloth. So this is the wheel that's probably the lowest maintenance out of all my spinning wheels. Let's move so my head's in shot so you can see me. It's a Woolmaker's Bliss. It's made by the same company who make Bluet, but it's Formica, as in like the kitchen worktops and the kitchen cupboards. That basically means it doesn't need anything other than a quick wipe with the duster to get rid of any dust off, and maybe a quick wipe with the damp cloth, like you would on a kitchen worktop, just to get rid of any of the really grubby bits. Some people have done quite fancy painting and everything, sort of decorating bits. It's got seal bearings where in the drive wheel, and it's got seal bearings at the point where the flyer rotates, so none of that needs oiling and none of it really needs cleaning, but it will still benefit from me cleaning off the flyer shaft because that part does still need oiling. It'll still benefit from me taking a look at the drive band, making sure that's okay, and taking a look at the Scotch tension, making sure the rubber band doesn't need replacing, and just generally giving it a wipe down to get rid of any of the dirt. But it's the lowest maintenance out of all my wheels, so this one's going to be quite quick to do. So on this wheel, as I'm looking in, I can see I've got a clump of fibre stuck in the gap between, this is the drive wheel and the back bit. There's a little bit of wedge of fibre that's just stuck in that gap there. So I'm just going to go and see what I've got to hand for hoiking it out. That'll do. So sometimes I've got tweezers. As I say, I've got a few pairs of what I call sort of sacrificial embroidery threads, because the chances are you're not going to be able to use them for anything other than random stuff after you've done this. And I'm just trying to sort of tease and pick away to pull it out. I think that's got it. So it wasn't a great big clump. I've seen clumps that are much worse, but it will make a real, you don't want a wedge of fibre wrapping itself around a part that rotates. It's just not a particularly useful thing. Also, I'm going to make sure that all the drive bands are left not under tension, because particularly with these stretchy ones, what happens if you then don't spin on them for a while is that they end up stretching out, and when you want to come and use it, your spinning wheel doesn't have, the drive wheel just keeps slipping. So all this one really needs now, I've given it a wipe down, more oil on the flyer shaft. The Scotch tension band itself looks fine, so I'm not going to bother doing anything with that. But what I do need to make sure I do is it goes over the flyer shaft. And let's clip this one back together. So that's it if you've got a wheel with a strong finish on it and lots of seal. So this wheel is my grand old lady. She's an antique Norwegian wheel. She's probably 70, 80, maybe 90 years old. She still works beautifully. The large drive wheel is great. I found her just by keeping up a search on eBay, and eventually one popped up. She's been a bit neglected this year, I'm sad to say. She is rather covered in a fine layer of dust, and she will be one of the wheels that will really benefit from a really thorough good clean. The wood itself, I think, is stained pine rather than anything more exotic looking, and all of these spokes are held in by tiny little wooden spigots that have been driven in. And as the wood's driven out, as the wood's dried out over the past 40, 50 years, they're no longer as tight a fit as they can be. So I like to wax her every single year, because if I don't wax it every single year, what's going to happen is that these little pegs that are driven into this drive wheel, they're going to eventually fall out, and then I'm going to enter into the situation where I'm starting to lose the tension on these spokes, and then before you know it, if we've no longer got a working spinning wheel, we've got a pile of firewood, which is not so great. So let's put this bobbin away properly. The thing's been sat there for goodness knows how long. And this one does just have a string drive band because it works in double drive rather than Scotch tension, and it needs quite a fine drive band, otherwise it gets a bit grumpy. So I'm going to take the flyer off, put it carefully to one side so that I don't accidentally step on it or tread on it. As I say, most of the dust I'm going to just wipe off with a soft duster. If there's anywhere where it seems particularly sticky or particularly marked, what I might do is I might just do it with the damp cloth. But for the most part, I try to just do it dry, so to speak, and rely on the cloth picking up the layer of dust. Okay, so as I say, don't be necessarily afraid of fiddling about with your wheels and taking them sort of to pieces. With the wheels that have got screws, Allen keys, bolts to hold them together, now's a really good time to go over them, tighten all of them up, because they do work loose. And particularly with wheels like Ashford Traditionals, I have had them in workshops where you've got the upright legs like that, and the action of treadling forces the legs to splay slightly. So as somebody's treadling, you're watching the entire wheel flex and move. And it was purely a case of, once I got the toolkit out and I tightened up bolts that were extraordinarily loose, all that stopped, and all of a sudden the wheel became far easier to treadle. So it's a really easy thing to do. The Allen keys that IKEA supply are rather handily exactly the right size. So if you've ever bought IKEA furniture and have therefore got a drawer full of IKEA Allen keys, you've now got the perfect size one to go with most of your wheels. And you don't want to over tighten them, so probably not a good idea to get the enthusiastic DIYer to do it in the house. You just need to just go to finger tight, the sort of tension that you could undo it again very easily if you needed to, but not so that it's all wiggling and loose. But with this one, I'm going to take it to pieces. It's all completely a wooden peg construction, so, and I love these. There are little notches cut into the drive wheel, and this side has one notch and this side has two notch, and on the pegs that hold the wheel in place, go on, focus. Hey, it doesn't want to see. Ooh, there we go, bring it this way. Okay, you can see that there are two notches on this one that goes at the back, and this one doesn't have a notch at all. But it means that I always know when I'm putting it back together that the fact that this one's got two notches in, and they line up perfectly with the two notches that are on the back drive wheel. So this whole thing now lifts completely apart. It's actually a very easy wheel to transport, bizarrely, because you can just take that drive wheel out and then you've actually got something that's quite small and compact. So even though it's a big wheel, it's not that big a wheel. One of the reasons I wanted to take this apart is I just wanted to have a look at these uprights here. When I bought this wheel second hand, I did have to do quite a bit of work on it, because one of the things that it did have was that these maidens were splaying, and they've still got a little bit of give in it, but not too much. And what I ended up actually having to do is I ended up slide down so you can see the base like that. I ended up having to put some wooden pegs and drove them into from the underside to hold all this firm, because of course the wood's dried out as time's gone on, and then just sanded them flat. This one here, the this supporting upright on the leg, that was moving as well. And again, I just wooden wedged that, and I don't think I could manage to get a very good way in with the sandpaper, so I've actually just left them. Come for the theory, it's better that it works well than it necessarily looks pretty. But anyway, so that's the drive wheel off, which now gives me much better access to all the rest of the wheel to have a go at taking it apart. What's gone on with the drive band here? It's got itself completely wedged. There we go. So I'm just going to give that a bit of a trim, because one of the things I can find, what have I done with the scissors? Scissors, they were here. That's ridiculous. I have no idea where I've put the scissors. I'll find them later. So this treadle bar here, this bit had worn itself into not being a very good fit, and the only way other than replacing the entire leg, so what I've actually done is I've used a bit of wool wedged into that hole to make it a tighter fit, and that rather helpfully holds on to a bit of a reservoir of oil, which helps stop this whole treadle bar from creaking, because that can also be, it's the same mechanism as on like an Ashford traditional, and sometimes they can get dreadfully creaky treadles, and usually it's to do with what's going on here in terms of oil and other bits of lubrication. So that's now all had a good dust. I'm going to go over it with the wax polish, and I'm going to wipe off any of the dirty bits of oil, so making sure I don't damage that. So this has leather bearings which will gradually soak up lots and lots of the oil. I'm just going to make sure all the wedges are nice and tightly in place. These bits back here, they're also leather, so again they will have just carried on soaking up all the oil that I've put on it. When I bought this wheel, I don't think it had been used a great deal. So it's taken quite a lot of work to get to the point where it's really well lubricated and it runs smoothly. I'm going to wipe the excess oil off those bits. So it's a sign I've not used this wheel very much. It's also all really quite dried. It's because these leather bits soak up any oil that's left. Right, more polish. Right, more polish required. Just making sure that this wheel doesn't dry out any further if I can possibly help it. So that's all my wheels. They've all had a jolly good clean up, a polish, all the dirty oil wiped off, all the nuts and bolts have been tightened up, all put back together again, and they're all ready to give me service throughout the next 12 months. Probably should do it more often, but at least if I do it every Christmas it's done. They're now an awful lot cleaner than all the rest of my house, because the past few weeks have been absolutely insanely busy, and housework has been one of the things that's slipped by the wayside. It's a sign of my priorities that spinning wheels have had care before the rest of the house has put together. So maybe some point during this holidays you might think, yeah, I'll give my spinning wheel a bit of TLC and a bit of a tidy up.